Hello everyone. In this video we are going to discuss about variables and constant declaration in Google Apps Script. So let me open the Google Script editor. And here are the things that we are going to see in today's video. The first one is what is variable and declaring a variable, assigning a value to a variable, assigning a new value to a variable, using operators with variables, finding the type of variable, best practices for naming variable scope, and finally constant. So let's see one by one. First we will explore what is variable. So in any programming language, if you want to store something and you want to retrieve later, then you can make use of the variable. You can store anything to the variable. It could be a number, it could be an integer, it could be a decimal, or it could be a string, dictionary, array. You can do anything to the variable, and that is the purpose of variable, and you can retrieve later as long as the variable that you are accessing is within the scope, and that we are going to see in the variable scope. So that is all about what is variable, and let's explore declaring a variable. So when you declare a variable in Google Apps Script or in JavaScript, you can use a keyword var followed by the variable name. Let's name the variable name as a first name. So this var represents that you are going to declare a variable, and this define the name of the variable. And if you want to assign something to this, you can do so with equal to operator followed by the value that you want to assign. If you want to assign a string, you can put that inside the double quotes, and if you want to assign a number, you can directly put that without double quote. You can also use float, and you can assign the value like this. So I want to assign a first name to this particular variable. So I'm using double quotes, and inside the double quotes I'm giving my first name here. So whenever I use the first name, this value will get retrieved. So let me show you an example. To show you an example, let me create a simple function, but we will explore more about the function in the upcoming videos, because right now we are focusing mainly on variables and constants. Let's name this as func01. So here I already declared a variable. So if I want to use this variable, I can simply use the variable name instead of the value that I assigned. So this logger.log help you to print the value that is stored in the variable. So I'm going to print a first name here and save this project, and ensure that you have selected the function name func01, and finally click on the run. So now we print the value Rajan, and this is the value Rajan which gets stored in the variable called first name. So instead of using the value every time, I can use the first name to get the value stored inside this double quotes. And one more great advantage of variable is you can change the value of variable anytime. So once you declare and define a value to a variable, doesn't mean that it's getting stored permanently in this variable. At any point of time, you can change the value or the text that gets stored in this variable name. So first I initialize the variable first name with Rajan. Now I'm going to change the first name to, let's say, hello world. And if I'm going to print the first name, it's not going to print Rajan, because in this line we have changed the variable name. So if I run that, it's going to print hello world, because here I have reassigned my variable value. And if you print the first name just before the reassignment, you are going to get Rajan here. So I'm putting the logger.log before the first name is equal to hello world. Then I'm going to execute it again, and here you will see first it print the word Rajan and followed by hello world, because the line number 16 take care of changing a value to this variable. And that's all about assigning a new value to a variable. So in Google Apps Script, you can assign a value either at the time of declaration or at a later point. So if you want to just declare a variable, you can do so like this, and here you can do an assignment inside the function or at later point of time. So when you just declare a variable and if you print the value of the variable, it's going to give you an undefined, because the assignment take place at line number 16. So after that, it's going to print whatever the value that you assigned here. So if I execute that same method again, first it's going to print null. So once I assign a value hello world, this value is going to get stored in the variable name first name, so it print the hello world here. And the next one is using operators with variables. There are few operators in Google Apps Script, but we are going to explore a couple of operators here because we are mainly focusing on the variables and the constants here. But just to give you an intro to the operators, we are going to see that as well. So let's say I declare a variable called num10 and one more variable called quantity, which is 5, and I want the total to be the product of num and quantity. So to find the product, I can use the star operator, and I'm going to print the total here. So it should be the product of num and quantity, and this is the use of operator here. So it gives 5 product 10, which gives a 50. So likewise, we have a plus operator which take care of addition. 10 plus 5, 15, and similarly we can use all the mathematical operators, but we'll explore the operators in detail in the upcoming videos. And the next one is type of variable. So if you define a variable and at later point of time, if you want to find the type of variable, you can make use of the keyword called type of. So in the line number 15, I declared a variable with a variable name num and assigned a number to it. So if I go ahead and print type of followed by variable name num and click on the run, it's going to give me the type of variable. So the type of variable num is number because it stored the number. If I don't declare anything and if I just execute this variable num, it's going to give me undefined because we haven't assigned anything, and the Google Apps Script is unable to find the type of the variable. And if I'm going to assign some text to that, the type should be the string. And if I'm going to create a dictionary, let's say I'm not going to define a dictionary, it's an empty dictionary, and if I run this function again, it's going to give me the type as object. Let's define an empty array and see the type of the num. So for both dictionary and array, the type is going to be object, and for number, float, numerals and everything is going to be the number, and for the string it's going to be the string. So you can find the type of any variable using this keyword type of followed by the variable name. And the best practices for naming variable. There are some best practices that you should consider when naming variables. So the first one is the usage of camel case. So first start the variable name with a lowercase followed by the second name as uppercase. Let's say you are going to create a variable name called first name. You can start the first with small case and name by starting n in uppercase. This is one of the best practices, and instead of camel case, you can also use underscore to make it more meaningful. And variable name can only contain letters, numbers, underscore or $sign, and variable name must start with a letter, $sign or an underscore. Variable name cannot start with number, and variable name cannot contain spaces. So let's say if you define something like that, this is not a valid variable name. And you cannot use certain words as a variable name. So the function that you see here is a reserved word, so you cannot create a variable name with function. It's going to throw an error here. So this is all about the best practices for defining a variable name. So the next thing that we are going to see is variable scope. So when you define a variable within the function, you can access the variable anywhere within the function. You cannot access outside the function. So let's say I define a variable name called cat, and if I want to access the variable name cat inside the function, I can do so with the variable name. So if I execute the function, it's going to print meow. So I'm going to declare one more variable, and I'm going to name that as func02, and let's say I'm not going to declare, and I want the value meow, which gets stored in the variable name cat. So in this case, if I want to print the variable value that get assigned to the variable name cat on function2, it's not going to print. So I have to execute the function2. So let me select function2 and then click on run. So it is going to give an error, a reference error, cat is not defined, because the scope of the variable cat is within the function. It cannot be accessed outside the function. And if you want this variable cat to be accessed outside the function, then you have to change it to a global variable. So to change this to a global variable, you have to take that variable out of the function and put it at the top, that is outside the function. So if I'm going to execute the function2 again, it's going to print meow because the scope is global. So whatever that you define within the function, it is a local scope, and whatever the variable that you define outside the function comes under global scope. So that's all about variable scope, and the next thing we are going to discuss about is constant. So constants are just like a variable, except the fact that you cannot change its value after assigning one to it. So to declare a constant, you have to use a keyword called const, similar to how you used a var in declaring a variable. Similarly, you have to use a const, and the best practices that you can follow while defining constant is the constant name should always be in uppercase. Let's say pi. So I'm going to assign a value 3.14 to this constant pi, and I'm going to print the value here. So let's execute this. First save the project, and now execute the function. It's going to print 3.14. So as I mentioned, you cannot change the value that you assign to the constant at a later point of time. So if I'm trying to reassign the value pi from 3.14 to 4.14, and if I run this function, I'm going to get an error, assignment to a constant variable type error. So it says that I cannot assign a different value to the constant. So the constant is something that you can use if you want to store some constant values throughout the program, and that's the purpose of constant. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned more about variables and constant declaration in Google Apps Script. And if you like this video, give thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye bye.